and welcome to the About Small Business podcast. My name's Barry McDermott. Thank you for watching. If you are enjoying what we're doing, just bringing news about small businesses to the forefront, then please do give us a like and a subscribe by clicking the link and the little notification bell below. Welcome to the 21st edition of this podcast. And in this podcast, I'm actually talking to Liza Johnson from Tea Enthusiasts and the Mint Business Club. Although I do know, Liza, they're not the only businesses that you've been involved with or have a hand in.
No, certainly not.
So, but certainly what's fascinated me is having just had a cup of your tea. It is absolutely amazing.
Oh,
It's as I mentioned earlier, it is better than the Aldi Gold label I'm used to.
Although no shade to Aldi, because they're out there doing God's work, but yes.
Fair enough. But it is lovely tea. At what stage in someone's life do they decide that they're going to pursue a career in tea?
Well, for that story, we're going back 20 years. So this is on the 31st of August this year, that business is 20 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. Some sustainability there for you. But I was a social worker. Before that was my one attempt at not being self-employed, and it ended in tribunals. So
Right. Okay. So if we just go back then,
yeah.
So you presumably left school, went to university, got a job as a social worker.
Yeah,
or trained as a social worker.
all of that, yep. And then when I was pregnant with my first, I went off coffee entirely, and I got very into tea. We haven't discussed this off camera, so I'm going to just jump you with it on camera. I'm autistic.
Right.
So when I get into something, I don't just get into it a little bit.
Okay.
Both feet right in, up to
Right.
the neck. So I didn't just get into tea and start buying different tea bags in the supermarket. I started importing different samples from China and Japan and Kenya, mostly, a little bit from Sri Lanka, and trying them and sharing them with friends. And then when my second child was born, trying to be a full-time social worker is almost impossible. You throw in being a bit of a single parent and everything else, and it wasn't going to work. So at that point, I'm already buying them in and sharing with my friends and basically selling them, try this, try this, try this. So I thought, well, what's the reckoning I can do that for money? So yeah. So I sat down my mother and convinced her that we could sell tea on the internet.
Right.
And I know you're like, yeah, that makes sense. But this was 2004.
Very different times.
Yes,
Very different
times. Very different times for e-commerce. So yes, I've been selling tea online since 2004.
That demonstrates a degree of foresight in the way that things were going. What gave you that idea? What made you think this is going to work for me? Because as you just said, back in those times, there weren't the platforms. I think sort of eBay was relatively in its infancy.
Mm-hmm.
There was certainly no Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah.
Certainly no Shopify or anything like that. What made you think this is going to be the way to go?
So, and this is kind of what I teach in Mint Business Club. You have to run a business that is sustainable by you. The number one person your business should work for is you. Because if you're running a small business and it doesn't work for you, it's not going to last very long.
No.
So with two small children and being autistic, I couldn't open a shop. I couldn't stand on markets every weekend. I couldn't throw hundreds of thousands of pounds into opening cafes and this kind of thing. And I didn't want to run a cafe.
No.
I'd done my years in hospitality when I was a student. And it is flipping hard work. So no, thank you. So yeah, it made sense to me to go online. And I still have somewhere a copy of, well, a screenshot effectively of my first website, and by today's standards it is horrendous. Really horrendous, but it slowly but surely got us there. So yeah. And
Right. So how were you? I mean, were you using? I'm trying to think. Was PayPal the?
so kind of, but Barclays.
Right.
So literally like a Barclays EPOS system, it was really expensive by today's standards, to
Yeah.
try and take payments.
But they facilitated you being able to.
They were one of the few people who did do a global payment system that you could use back then. So,
Right.
yeah.
And so you've got your website set up. I mean, did you do that yourself? Or
So a bit yeah and a bit no. So I did bits of it, but I'm not fantastic at coding. I don't have the eye for detail. And back then you couldn't build a website without coding and HTML and all this kind of thing. So yeah, no, I did. I had someone else come on board and help me with that.
right. Okay. So what platform were you? I'm just trying
It
to
really
remember back
wasn't a
then.
platform. Yeah, see, they weren't these sort of big platform things. That's not really how it went. There wasn't even really WordPress. So
No, I'm just thinking back. I seem to
you
recall
coded from scratch.
Dreamweaver,
Yeah, oh, yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah,
we had
yeah.
Dreamweaver.
Dreamweaver.
I went on to another program called Rapid Weaver.
Yeah.
Think would have
No, I never
actually no
touched
that
Rapid.
actually no that wasn't around then. No, we are early then. That's
Yeah.
Dreamweaver. I think because I a couple of years after that I started my website, which is when I was teaching.
Yeah.
And it was just basically a site to share resources, and I managed to get a copy of Dreamweaver through the school.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'm not a coder myself either,
No.
but that that kind of worked. And
I built the website again, was it last year or the year before? I can't remember now. And I went to Bluehost and I
right,
just paid them some money and downloaded the template and threw some photos and a bit of copy on it. And it was live in 24 hours. And I remember sitting back and looking at it and going, ha, that's a journey. It's very different. And obviously that one didn't involve any e-commerce and things, which does complicate.
right. So I mean, in terms of the time frame for your original website,
Oh God, it took months.
I was going to say because it was
Months.
back then it was such a massive task, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
and it didn't help that, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. And the first time you do anything, it takes longer and you're bad at it. And then slowly but surely you get a bit better and a bit faster until you forget how hard it once was. So, yeah, things like writing product descriptions. I mean, I can do it now, just I voice type them into my phone and then just send them off.
Yeah.
Back then, I'd spend 24 hours and I'd sit and agonize over every word that went into every listing. And, I didn't really know what keywords were and I had to go and figure all of that out. And search engines were really in their infancy, so no one really knew how they work.
I'm not sure people know now, do they?
Well, if they don't, I do teach that, so they can come and find
All
out.
right, there you go.
But yeah, so it was everything was painstaking and doing the branding and doing it was painful. It was
Yeah,
really, 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 really slow and painful.
but it didn't put you off.
I I haven't felt like I had any other choices. Like this was I felt at the time, and rightly or wrongly, but I felt at the time that I had to make this work.
Right.
So it was that traditional kind of small business. I'm going to give this absolutely flipping everything,
Yeah.
and I will make it work, or I will die on the hill trying.
It's just a really interesting choice that the route that you took.
Yeah,
You've explained obviously why you didn't go the traditional shop route.
yeah,
I think with hindsight, I think that was probably wise given the number
yeah,
of shops that are closing down to go online. Um, were you trying to sell through? I was just going to ask you about eBay
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Etsy.
So
Were you using those?
I still do. So I have a six-figure business on Amazon, that runs out of Dipton. And people are always a bit surprised by that. I think we're the third largest independent tea merchant in the northeast of England, because you've got Ringtons and Pumphreys,
Yeah.
then us.
Well, I was going to say they're the more traditional route as well, aren't they? That sort of direct to door sales.
Yeah, that direct to door stuff. People are always like, "Oh, you must hate Ringtons." I don't hate Ringtons. They're the good guys, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to get rid of the tea bags that are on the shelves in the supermarket. Those are the rubbish. But yeah, no. But there's not many independent tea merchants around, more than there used to be, though.
Right.
More than they used to be. And in the 20 years I've been doing it, I've seen quite a few companies come and go. Some locally and some nationally and some online. And yeah, it's always a bit sad to me when that happens, because I think
Yeah.
there's space for more of us.
I think what's interesting is, and it's always been a little bit of a bugbear of mine that coffee seems so prevalent, because for me, I'm very much a tea drinking person. I love tea.
Yeah.
I'll have coffee at a push. We've started trying to get up early in the morning, go for a walk, and like sort of quick sip of coffee can wake you up. I can see the
Oh, I know.
benefits, but it's just when you see like sort of the big coffee
Yeah.
merchants on the high street that are dominating now,
Yeah.
and it does frustrate me a little bit when certainly in this country I feel a lot of people are feeling that there's a little bit of an identity crisis going on.
Yeah.
One of the biggest traditions, and yet we're shunning it to be more American and drinking coffee.
And I mean, here's what happened from someone inside the industry.
Yeah.
Deep secrets. No, so what happened is American and to a certain extent European influence coming over with the coffee. And coffee shops were kind of forced to up their game. So you and I are of an age. We remember going into a coffee shop and you'd get Nescafe
Yeah.
in a cup. Or sometimes a milky coffee, which was warm milk with some Nescafe stirred into it. And those were basically your coffee options,
Yeah.
white and black. But the customer started demanding better. So the coffee shops had to deliver better. And now we've gotten ourselves to a situation where to run a cafe these days, you have to spend £10,000 on a coffee machine.
Yeah.
Plus training, plus a different cup for all of the different flipping types of coffee, plus, you know, the milk and the milk machines and the grinder for the coffee bean and all of that. And coffee basically is only two different types of beans. I'm going to really annoy Bernard from Durham Coffee here. So I'm not even going to apologize, Bernard, if you're watching this. It's two different beans. Get over it. It's not that much of a flavour difference. And yeah, there's nuance to, you know, you can tweak the roast slightly this way and you can tweak where it was grown slightly this way. But when you come to the world of tea that's grown in China and tea that's grown in Japan, green tea,
Yeah.
same plant, completely different flavour. And part of it's because of how it's grown and how it's nurtured, and part of it's because of how it's withered after it's picked. So, for instance, the Chinese will pan fry theirs to stop the fermentation process, whereas in Japan they steam it and roll it, which gives you a completely different flavour profile.
Yeah.
And beyond that, in this country, anything that's not coffee or hot chocolate is basically tea, which includes a lot of things that aren't technically tea.
Right. So I mean, in the stuff that you've criticised in the supermarkets, where will that come from, and what will that be?
So, most of the tea that you buy in the supermarket is what we in the industry call dust and fannings, which
Doesn't sound appetizing.
doesn't sound appetizing because it's not. It's the lowest grade quality. And even when they're talking about, you know, we only take the top two leaves and it's the best pick. No, it's not. They also the large companies are mostly run by 2 or 3 different organizations. So Procter & Gamble, for instance, owns, and Unilever own a lot of your tea. So Unilever will own huge tea plantations, mostly in Africa, so Kenya, places like this, where they run large-scale organizations, and they've stripped kind of all the personality out of it. It's high product,
Yeah.
but low skill farming.
I suppose, like as you'd probably expect with any mass-produced
Yeah,
products,
it is.
there are gonna be compromises to get it to the price point that someone can afford to pay.
I don't know whether people know this. If you want to take a food product and stock it into the supermarket, by the time you go through distribution and you go through the wholesale price and you go through having to pay for the marketing and everything else, you're losing 70 to 80% of the value of that product. So you'll be lucky if you keep 20%.
Yeah.
You'd be lucky, extremely lucky, if 20% of that sale price goes back to the original manufacturer. So for most small-scale, high-quality products, stocking your product into a supermarket is just not an option.
No.
You've got to make so much compromise on how it's produced and the quality of the actual product to get into a supermarket that most micro and small business owners would not be willing to. I'm not willing to make those
No.
compromises. It's not a dream that I have for tea enthusiasts to see the product on a supermarket shelf.
I mean, are there any health issues connected with tea in a supermarket?
So you get plastic in tea bags, and that's something you should watch out for. There's a lot of plastic in a lot
It
of
seems
tea
to crop
bags.
up everywhere at the minute, doesn't it?
It does. And if you are looking to drink tea for the health benefits, because there are a lot of health benefits to tea, then getting a better quality leaf will get you more of the health benefits. Most of the health benefits are they're all in the leaf, but there's essential oils and things in those leaves. Even when you're talking about herbal tea, peppermint tea, something like this, all of those health benefits are in the oils. So if you chop it up really small and put it into a tea bag and then store it on a shelf, it's not going to retain those oils as well as something that's well curated and well taken care of. The same with everything. The more you buy it from someone who's passionate about making it, the more likely you are to have an excellent quality product.
Have things got better or worse since you started out?
I think things are getting better. So it's a weird ebb and flow in this country. 50, 60 years ago, most people were drinking loose leaf tea.
Yeah.
It was all one type of tea. We weren't drinking a lot of herbal tea and things like this. No, not green and black, but it was that sort of builder's brew.
Yeah.
And your granny would have a pot on it on the back of the stove. Occasionally I go down to Beamish Museum and do a talk on tea to the kids. But the tea drinking was this, especially in the north. You come in for your tea, and there was tea.
Yeah.
And it was thick, and it was black, and it was nourishing. But it was loose leaf. And then, for whatever reason, in the 1950s, we decided to start putting it into little bags. And I will never for the life of me understand why. Because, some people say it's more convenient, but you've seen the little infusers we use. It takes an extra 3 seconds to make a cup of tea with one of those. And it gives you such a better quality product. And it is so much better for the planet. Because anytime you add in any extra processing step, that's worse for the planet.
Yeah.
You're using resources you don't need to use. And when it comes to loose leaf tea, you can get pyramid bags and you can get silken bags. Watch out for the word silk. It's often a euphemism for plastic.
Right.
And you can get biodegradable bags and all of these kinds of things, but ultimately it's still adding an unnecessary process.
Yeah, that stands to reason. So it would appear, just from what you're saying about going to Beamish and things like that, I suppose by selecting such a niche area, you then do become a kind of a go-to expert as well.
Yeah.
Has that afforded you like other opportunities, like sort of consulting on?
It possibly could
different
have,
things?
but I've never really. Well, when the kids were younger, I was very happy. So I want you to picture for a second. Okay, you love tea, right?
Yeah.
So imagine for a second you could build a working life where you only work with your mates in a building that you completely control the surroundings of. So there's Jazz FM, there's always a nice cup of tea, there's never too much work that you're overstressed, but there's always something interesting going on to keep your curiosity. Why would I leave?
Yeah.
Like, why would I go looking for other opportunities? So when the kids were younger, I really genuinely just sort of stayed in my bunker. So it was kind of 7 years ago that I raised my head above the parapet and the kids were kind of self-sufficient and they weren't looking to me. I didn't even pick them up from school and do drop-offs and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, what else is out there?
So in terms of your promotion for the tea,
Yeah.
We did mention briefly about you have some experience with SEO.
Yes.
Do you do much on social media or?
I used to do quite a lot. And then I realised I was doing a lot and not getting a lot in return. So you can find the tea enthusiasts on all of the social media platforms. I should do that bit, shouldn't I? So you can find us on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and not really Twitter these days, or X or whatever we're calling it these days.
Seems to be going downhill a bit. Not people seem to be leaving.
I don't think my customers are on there anymore. But yeah, I found I was putting in a lot of activity and a lot of effort and a lot of time, and I wasn't getting a lot back. And I realized at the same time that what I was putting out and getting back was with Pinterest and
Oh,
SEO.
okay. Yeah.
So with Pinterest and SEO, it's a lot more evergreen. So you're not having to put in the effort every day, every week. You're
Yeah.
just building up a body of content that is recognized. So I took the time that I was spending on social media and I invested a little bit of money into advertising on Google, Google ad campaigns.
Yeah.
And that had a much better return on investment than doing the social media.
Right. So you've tried a few different channels and you just found that the SEO worked for you.
Yeah, the exception to that, I would say, is TikTok right now.
Okay.
Yeah, every time I play with TikTok, I make sales, and it's like, oh, I should really put more effort into that.
So before they ban it as well, they're banning it in America, I think they're talking
They're
about
not
this.
gonna ban
You don't
it.
think?
No. And anyway, it's one of those, I've been in business for 20 years. They ban it, the next thing will come along.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier on
Hmm.
that you're autistic,
Hmm.
and I just want to go back to school. How did you find school? Because certainly there wasn't the support then. I think a lot of parents might argue there's not enough now,
Oh, yeah, let's just put that out there
but
as a
there
fact.
was certainly more. There's certainly more now than what there was when you would have been at school.
Yeah, I
So,
mean,
what was school like for you?
well, obviously, when I was at school, I didn't know I was autistic. I have known for 17 years, so I've known a lot longer than most adult females. Um, 18 years actually now. But so no, when I was at school, let's go. I grew up on the Meadowell. Are you aware of the Meadowell, Barry?
The Meadowell. I'm not sure I am.
So the Meadowell is a delightful area just outside of North Shields, where all the
Right.
riots happened in the 80s, and they burned the place to the ground. So that's where I went to school.
Right.
Um, and even now, it's considered to be one of those troubled areas.
Yeah.
But back then, it was a hugely problem area.
No
Now,
one could accuse you of being a silver spoon kid then.
oh God, no. So my dad left the army, and they bought a house in North Shields with a little bookshop underneath. So
Okay.
my mum ran a bookshop, and we lived above, and my dad was off doing his various different bits of work. So yeah, my parents have been self-employed most of their lives, and I think I'm going to loop this back around beautifully to your question about autism. My dad is very definitely autistic, and my mom almost certainly has ADHD. I
Right.
mean, they're in their 70s, so we're not testing for that, but I think a lot of neurodivergent people find themselves self-employed because they don't fit into systems. And this is what happened to me at school.
Mm.
So I went to school on the Meadowell estate and I got bullied a lot
Mm.
because I liked doing weird things like reading books and watching black and white movies. So I was nearly burned as a witch, to be honest. So yeah, I didn't really fit in there at all. But my parents are huge believers in education, and because they could see that it wasn't working,
Yeah.
I ended up at a grammar school. So I got taken out of state education and put into a private grammar school. And they scrimped and managed to pay for the first year, and
Yeah.
then I got kept on a scholarship because I am occasionally a lucky duck. So yes, I went to Eastcliff Grammar School. It is no longer there.
Right.
I didn't do that, by the way. That's not on me. So yes, I went to Eastcliff Grammar School, and by sheer luck, I think, or the fact that we're all drawn to each other, my parents picked a school just full of weirdos. So that worked out much better.
Yeah.
I mean, I was still weird, but I was at least with other
Within good
people
company.
who were also weird.
It's
So yeah, yeah, the fact that I spent my weekends like reading comic books and watching Star Trek and
all right. What sort of
yeah.
comic books?
Oh, so back then there wasn't loads you could get. So you get like the Commando, and you'd get Misty Comics for Girls and 2000 AD and Judge Dredd. So that's what I was kind of raised on. And then as I got a bit older, I discovered, because I didn't really like the superhero comics,
Ah,
like
see
Batman and
that was my
Spider-Man.
thing. You see,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
the Marvel comics, total Marvel comics nerd.
Yeah, like Superman, like he's too perfect.
Yeah,
And Batman's too obviously flawed, and we can't be sitting around for rich white men to come and save the world. Like, surely that day's past. So no, when I moved on from those comic books, I went through Terry Pratchett
yeah.
and then into Neil Gaiman.
Okay.
So
Yes, I like a lot of his stuff.
yeah, so I went into that sort of weird area of American comics. I actually managed a comic book shop
Really?
for 12 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So I have full nerd credentials.
So, which comic book shop was that?
So it was, I'm not going to say the name because it's still running,
Oh,
and my
okay.
ex-husband took it when he left, so I'm not giving
Ah,
him any
see,
free
right, okay.
publicity. Sorry. But yeah, but we traveled around, we did Comic Cons. In this region there was a Comic Con called MoriaCon in
Right.
Stanley. We were part of organising that, and not in the first year, but in subsequent years. Really enjoyed doing that. We did a Comic Con in Cramlington Shopping Centre in Manor Walks Comic Con, Mall Con, I called it.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I organised sort of Comic Cons and worked with various sort of celebrities and getting them booked in and all of that kind of
Wow.
stuff.
So, is this before you trained as a social worker then, or?
During and after, so I was running the tea company and the comic stuff at the same time. There's a lot of overlap in
This,
my
yeah, that's
stuff. Yeah.
you clearly like keeping yourself busy.
Well, if it's not mentally stimulating, I get bored and kind of
Yeah,
wander off. Um,
that's
yeah, even when I was on maternity leave, I set up a community house and organisation, and that is still running to this day. And my youngest is 22 now.
right.
So yeah, I'm not good at doing nothing. Very bad at doing nothing.
In your opinion, would you say that in certainly in your working life, in your business life, your autism's helped you?
Yeah, I would say, and I steer clear of calling it a superpower, and I know some people do, and I have no problem with that. It's your autism. You should deal with it the way you do.
Yeah,
It has caused some challenges in my life, but I was raised by individuals to be an individual, and I think if I was raised to try and conform and fit in, it would have caused me a lot more pain and a lot more discomfort.
mm,
Um, but I have built a life around living authentically as who I am. And I think if you do that, you're much more likely to be successful in whatever you do.
how old were you when you developed the confidence to do that? Just with you saying about being bullied
Yeah.
and things, because I mean, there's pressure on all of us
Mm-hmm.
to conform at school,
Mm-hmm.
and within state school, they've not got the money and the resource, certainly not at the minute,
No, they don't.
to deal with that.
Yeah.
And I think for people like yourself, there comes a point where you're almost forced
Yeah.
to be happy with yourself
Yeah.
and accept yourself.
So it comes in stages. And I think, I mean, I'm now in my mid 40s and menopausal, and I think I'm the happiest with myself I've ever been.
Right.
And there was a time as a teenager where I tried vaguely to conform, and it very clearly wasn't going to work out. I would one weekend I'd kind of be a goth, and the next weekend I'd be at a rave, and then the week after that I'd be an emo or something. Like I like to try them all out. There's
Yeah.
no point getting married to any particular one. That's fine. Um, I think I've always been an individual, but have I always had full confidence to be who I am? No. And I think in business that stood me really well, and I have been very successful in my personal life. I've got 2 divorces under my belt,
Mm.
which hints at the fact that I perhaps didn't have the right read on people always
Right.
in my life. That's probably been one of the biggest struggles, was having the right read on people. And one of the things with autism is we tend to be very trusting and very loyal.
Right.
And if you give that to the wrong people, they will abuse
Then,
it.
yeah.
So, yeah, learning to be a bit less trusting, which feels horrible. Wouldn't it just be nice if we
It
could
is
just
an
be
absolute shame, isn't
trusting?
it, whenever well, just when anyone's in that kind of situation. But I completely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
It does feel at the minute like sort of a lot of people are sort of out for themselves and just to step over you for whatever advantage they can get.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I like about where I'm at now in business is I'm surrounded by other people and other businesses who do not have that attitude. They are people who want to be part of a community and they want to give as much as they take. And being surrounded by that kind of energy is huge.
Yeah.
The mental lift that that gives you is enormous. It's really worth it.
Before we agreed to do this, I wasn't aware of your autism, and that's what I like about this kind of thing. It's where the direction in which the conversation goes,
Yeah.
and it is interesting, and I hope. I'm sure already, you're providing an inspiration for people that don't fit in.
I think it's important. So, I was assaulted with my autism diagnosis, is how I like to describe
Right.
it. Because I was part of one of these, at the university they do these psychological studies,
Yeah.
and you can take part in them as a participant. Well, I was doing that and I got thrown off the study. And I wanted to know why. So eventually the guy who was in charge of the study agreed to meet with me and tell me why I'd been thrown off the study. And I went down there and I had a meeting with him. And he came into the office and he said, "You're very clearly autistic and you're screwing with my results. So I'm removing you from the study because you're affecting the results of the study."
That's confusing.
Yeah. And I kind of, and I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Look, this isn't a diagnosis because I haven't, sat with you to give you a diagnosis, but he was one of the leading people in the United Kingdom who does deal with autism." So, yeah, but at the time I was told that, we weren't having the conversations that we're having now about people who look like me having autism.
Yeah.
The only people I knew with autism, there was, the non-verbal and the rocking and
Yeah.
the non-functional. So I had nowhere to go with that and no one to talk to. So I got a large rock and I popped it underneath and I just put the rock back on top and I ignored it for a while. But then when my son was at primary school,
Yeah.
it was suggested that perhaps he might also have autism. They used the word Asperger's at the time, but we
Right.
don't use that term anymore. But yes, they suggested he might, and I was like, well, I might not want to look under that rock for myself, but I'm darn well going to go and move
Been
it for my
forced to
kid.
confront it for.
Yeah, yeah. So I went and lifted the rock, and I think it still took me a while to get the confidence to talk about it in public. But I mean, as you know, I'm a school governor.
Yeah.
And I've, well, technically I'm not now, but I have been for many years. And one of the things I would do is talk about being autistic when I visited schools. A, because it makes the adults around the table consider neurodivergence when
Yeah.
they're making decisions. And B, because it makes the young people look at me and go, "Oh, so you can have this neurodivergence and still lead a fulfilling, happy,
Yeah.
satisfactory life."
Well, a very successful life.
I mean, by my standards, as long as I'm happy, I'm
Yeah.
successful. That's
Yeah.
my bar. But yeah, I've so I like to demonstrate that that is a fact because not everybody has that in their family that they can look to.
No. I think it's interesting just that you almost prompted me then in terms of successful and happy,
Yeah.
because I suppose had you not gone through all of this, that happiness might have been a little bit more difficult. Whereas for your more conventional people,
Yeah.
looking at the success that you've had in business would be what they would perhaps judge as a success.
I don't see. I can't think like a neurotypical, so I don't know. I've tried in the past and I
Yeah.
don't know. What I do know, so with Mint Business Club, we've been doing a big study with the entrepreneurship department up at Durham University. A guy called Pablo, I'm going to butcher his last name, Muntaz, I believe.
Right.
And he works with the university, but he's very interested in entrepreneurship and its impact and how academia and entrepreneurship can work together a bit better.
Yeah.
So we're working and doing some research with him on self-worth and self-employment, because it is the statistics for people in self-employment and their sense of self-worth and their levels of mental ill-ease are not optimal. Let's put it that way.
I can
Yeah,
understand that.
so trying to unpick why and what we can do about it.
Yeah.
And I qualified as a business coach after I was doing mentoring for a while, and then realized I wanted to go a bit deeper. So I qualified as a business coach. And one of the things I really encourage people to do is lean into the truest forms of themselves and bring that to their business. So like I was saying before about I couldn't open a shop.
No.
And standing out in markets all the time wasn't really an option. So I built a business around me, my life as it was, not some pie in the sky idea of what maybe it could be one day. Well, when this is over, then I'll. No,
Yeah.
you got to start now with what you've got and build from there. But using the building blocks of who you authentically are. So something like this for me, that, you know, there's cameras and there's a microphone, you can probably, it doesn't faze me all that much.
No, not at all.
But for some people, this would be torturous.
Yes.
So they probably shouldn't do it. They should find other ways to work and talk about their business. And it's one of the things I do as a business coach, is help people to find the right path for them and their business, because you're much more likely to be successful if you're not fighting against your weaknesses and you're leaning into your strengths.
That's brilliant advice.
And yet,
Sounds
so
so
simple.
obvious. Sounds so obvious.
All the best advice is simple but not easy.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that is an interesting distinction as well. Simple but not easy.
Yeah.
As in, why didn't I think of that? But actually, I didn't think of that because I don't really want to do that, or I'm getting preoccupied with this.
Yeah, and it's tricky because, you know, as a business coach, sometimes people are like, well, I don't want to do that. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, because it's not your authentic, true self.
Yes.
And other times I'm like, no, you just don't want to get out your comfort zone, so I'm going to push you.
I think that's a big thing for a lot of people, though, isn't it? The comfort zone. Which I suppose for you didn't really have an option, did you?
No, I didn't really have a comfort zone. So my aim was to create a comfort zone. When I look back on it now. So I kind of created a comfort zone. You know, I was describing earlier, sat in the warehouse, Jazz FM, nice cup of tea. So yeah, I created my own comfort zone and surrounded myself with people who I really wanted to work with, which, yeah. But then you then have to leave that comfort. You can't just create a place of safety and then stay there.
No. That makes sense. I mean, at what stage did you become a business coach then?
So, well, we're going to go into a completely different business again now. If we can remember back to kind of the 2019.
Yeah.
There was a project in County Durham organised by the Food and Drink Network of County Durham. So the local authority was trying to bring together food and drink producers of County Durham to showcase their wares and discover what the flavour of County Durham was. Now, obviously, that was something that I'm fascinated by. The science of flavour. There's a reason why there's 150 different flavours of tea in the Tea Enthusiasts, and it's because the science of flavour absolutely intrigues me. So as soon as they were talking about this, I was like, I want in. And it was just at that time when I was lifting my head above the parapet and all of this kind of stuff. So I want in. So we were opening a shop in Durham City Centre in Prince Bishop's called A Local Love. And this was a local authority funded project. Yeah. So you could get your products into this shop. They would take a cut, but you know, it wasn't the same level of cut as your regular retail guys would take. So I participated in that. And after 6 months, they were like, well, that's the project over. What a success. Off we go. And I was like, no, there's more to this. There's some magic here that hasn't been explored yet. And Matthew Booth was one of the people who, well, he was the one who was left in charge of that project at the very end. And he reached out to the producers and he was like, I think this has got legs. And I'm like, me too. So we stuck our heads together and we worked with the other producers and we brought it back as a CIC. So a community interest company. The community that we were interested in was the local producers.
Yeah.
So that was our community that we were supporting. We expanded it from just being County Durham to being a 30-mile radius because, going to be honest, it included a bunch of our friends.
Yeah. Why not?
Who produced amazing food.
Yes.
And I think for your person on the high street, they don't mind if it comes exactly from County Durham or, if it's just over the border in
northeast, I think,
Northumberland, that's okay.
we're quite good.
So we ended up, I convinced poor Richard at Prince Bishop Shopping Centre to give us a 6-month free lease. The local authority were willing to write off our business rates because we're a community interest company and we were supporting local producers. And some of the local producers were willing to come and help us by working in the shop. So the overheads were so minimal. And we went to IKEA and we got shelves. And we had a pizza party and we screwed them all to the wall. And we opened. And it was fantastic. When you're going on holiday and you find that perfect little shop that's got all those little local things and you buy all the little gifts and you bring them back. I've always loved those shops.
Yeah.
And then I had one and it was beautiful and I loved it. So then the pandemic hit. And now I know what you're thinking, but we did fine.
All right.
No, this isn't one of those horror stories. We were too late in setting up to get any support or any help at all. But luckily our overheads were really low.
Yes, so.
And I knew the people who stocked in that shop were my friends. They were my colleagues. These were people who I'd been doing business with. When you go to the food festivals and things, these were the guys that we'd hang out and have a beer afterwards. And I was determined that they weren't going to sink on my watch. So the first thing I did was went through and paid every invoice in full because there was money in our bank account and I was like, let's just do that. And then every time we were allowed to open, we opened. And because we were selling food and drink, we were allowed to open more often than other shops. We went on social media. We promoted it as much as we could. I mean, I was trying to keep the tea enthusiasts running at the same time. So it was a heck of a time. There was one point my kids walked into the tea warehouse and staged an intervention and marched me out. Made me go to bed for the
Get the man back.
Yeah. And they were right to do that. And I appreciate them looking out for me because they're wonderful people. But but we got through it. And at the time that we went into the pandemic, there were 67 businesses on those books. And when we came out of the pandemic, we'd only lost 3. And that is phenomenal.
That is impressive.
And I'm not saying that was due to us, just to be clear. Just to be absolutely clear. Every single business owner worked their absolute
I mean, it must have helped, though.
Yeah, and I think bringing the community together so you had someone to talk to about what was going on. We used to have a monthly meet and mingle, or the monthly moan and groan, as I called it. And it was just where producers could come together if they needed to, they weren't forced to, have a drink and chat with other producers without being sold to.
Yeah.
Because usually us, the manufacturing, the people who are making the things, we're the people who everyone's trying to sell to.
Yes.
So you go to any kind of business or industry event and you have to fight off all the salespeople. But if it's just the producers in the room, no one's trying to sell to you. It's great. It's so liberating. And there's no one from sort of one of the larger organizations like Business Durham and things listening. So you can say whatever you like. And that is so freeing. So I'm mentoring the different businesses there. I stepped away from that in January 2023. So I resigned as a director of my own company, which was odd. It's still running. You can still visit Northern Stores in Delhi. It's still there in Prince Bishop Shopping Centre, and you can still buy lots of local produce. And they've opened a deli counter and everything now, which just goes to prove they didn't need me there anymore because they've continued to expand.
Still thriving.
Still thriving.
Which is brilliant news for the area.
But it had turned more from business support into more retail and running a shop, which isn't my dream.
No.
As I think I explained.
As you did, yep. So we kind of come full circle there almost, haven't we?
So so at that point I moved into the coaching. I decided to take the mentoring that I'd done and go and get a coaching qualification because coaching's one of those terms anyone can call themselves a coach.
Yes.
and it's a bit Wild West out there. So I didn't want to do that. And I knew that from back in my social work days, there were a lot of tools and interventions that I used to use back then that I figured would be quite helpful. But used wrongly, you can really mess with people's mindsets and actually set them back.
Yeah.
Which is far from ideal. So if I was going to go and do that, I wanted to do it properly. And by that point in time, I also understood just how much. So 1 in 5 people, they reckon, is neurodivergent in the general population. If you set foot anywhere around small business owners, that number leaps.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to create our own comfort zone.
Yeah.
We're trying to find a way to make the world of work make sense for ourselves and our brains. And often self-employment is the way to do that. So, yeah, I knew by that point that I was going to be working with a lot of neurodivergent individuals. And for some neurodivergent individuals, they're quite vulnerable. And I do not want to exploit that. And I don't want to give them any more difficulties than they already have. And if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to do it as ethically as possible. So I went and got a proper qualification. ILM, Institute of Leadership and Management, is a shiny bit on the certificate.
Right, okay.
Oh, yeah. So it's not a proper certificate without a shiny bit.
So that's where you are now. What does the future look like for you?
You've been eavesdropping on my conversations with my business coach. I don't know. And I think...
I mean, it's interesting listening to you because, I mean, in terms of your business highs and lows, you seem to have just done really, really well. You've created... I'm not sure whether saying against the odds is the right thing, because you've kind of just, I suppose, spun that perspective a little bit, because it's, as you say, you found your place, which I think it's all any of us can hope for.
Yeah.
In many respects, you're happier.
Yeah.
Now, than you have been previously.
Definitely.
And it's a. Yeah, it is kind of an interesting. So where does a woman who's got everything go from here?
Well, I don't have everything. I would quite like a place with a little balcony over somewhere foreign and warm, so I can escape the flipping rain. I've still got a lot of stuff to figure out. I firmly believe that personal development is business development. So I'm still on that personal development journey. I'm still working with my own business coach. And that's partially because I'm still answering the question, who am I and what do I want? And I'm not sure I'm ever going to fully answer that question. And I think this is one of the mistakes we make with young people when we're doing careers advice and we're talking to them. We're talking to them about, you're leaving school, what are you going to do? And they see that question as, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And that's not the question. It's, what are you going to do next? So for me, that's how I ask myself that question now, and I lightly hold it, because you don't know exactly where the next challenge is coming from. So I qualified as a business coach, and at that time I didn't know I was going to be holding Mint Business Club. But Nicola Jane Little, who you should definitely meet and interview, so she founded Mint Business Club, and then she founded an organization called Celebrate Difference.
Right.
And we are in the hub right now, which is owned by Celebrate Difference and is the registered address of Mint Business Club. And it's a beautiful building, and it is a hub for small business. But Celebrate Difference was created for neurodivergent business owners so that they could access government funding to help them access work in a more equal footing. And it's open to everyone with any kind of disability. So she started this, and it was going to be like just a little side part to Mint Business Club. Yeah. And then it escalated quickly and became a 7-figure business with 20 employees.
Wow.
Which is not a side pot to anything. It's more like a tech startup. So she really had to go and give that her full attention. And I had been a member of Mint Business Club for some time, and I was already delivering a chunk of their training. and I loved the ethos, and to quote the youth, the vibes were on point. So I really wanted to see it nourish and go. I reached out to Nicola and I said, is there anything I can do to help? And now I have Mint Business Club.
There you go.
But this is, so I keep my eyes and ears open, and
Yes.
I keep my eye on the horizon. And I think if you keep, there was a famous quote, and I'm gonna absolutely ruin it, but it's keep one hand on your heart and one eye on the horizon, basically. So if you stay true to yourself, but open to opportunity, you can't go too far wrong. And does that mean I've made wrong choices? Absolutely. I've made some crackers in my time. I've had some.
I've said before, you don't learn if you don't do that.
You don't learn if you don't fail. And the trick these days is I just try to fail faster.
Yes.
And it's all about how you get back up. So yeah, if you fail faster, then you can move on to the next thing a bit quicker.
That makes a lot of
Is
sense.
that top business advice? I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, if you're going to fail fast and then recover.
I think that is very good business advice and a brilliant way to round up. Liza, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's actually been really quite inspirational chatting to you. Really enjoyed it. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. No, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for bringing me to the world of podcasts.
There we go.
This will be this is my first podcast, but I doubt it'll be my last. I've enjoyed this. It's been great.
Well, I'll keep an eye out for any that are going on in the future. But from me and from About Small Business Podcast, thank you very much.